Hey guys, tonight we're diving nostrils first into an olfactory mystery, so wild it would have made Fabrizi file for bankruptcy. The secret sense of the rich before soap was invented. Yes, tonight you'll be swirling through the corridors of history, not as a noble, not as a peasant, just as a regular person with a functioning nose, bracing for the historic whiff of privilege. Before we marinate in lavender sachets and wipe away the memory of musk with a perfumed handkerchief, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. But only if you actually enjoyed this aromatic time warp. Let me know if you made it the whole way through or if you passed out halfway, felled by the ghostly stench of privilege. Dim your lights, crank the fan to breeze through a medieval castle. Get yourself cozy. And please, maybe snuggle a bar of modern soap, just in case you need a palate cleanser. Now, have you ever wondered, what did a duke really smell like after a long day of jousting and 0 showers? Could you survive a dinner party knowing every whiff carries a decade of history and dubious choices in hygiene? Was perfume truly just deodorant for the gods? Or was it the only thing keeping people from fainting at court? If you had to live without detergent, how many lavender sachets would it take to mask a Grand Duke's armpits after 4 hours in velvet? Could today's clean freaks handle a single morning in the Renaissance, or would they perish at the first sniff of a noble's wig? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the 1450s, smack dab in the centre of Europe's high society. You've never heard of soap. You're surrounded by wealth, but also, let's be honest, an almost visible funk. Good luck. You begin the day with a luxurious stretch atop what the wealthy call a featherbed. Spoiler alert, it's mostly straw, hay, dubious stains, and something rustling that's probably not your conscience. Welcome to the dawn ritual, scented with pillow mildew and the balmy aroma of centuries-old sheets. It's less spa retreat, more museum for ancient body odours. Your first challenge isn't the rising sun, but the bed itself, a lumpy, uneven battlefield that seems to conspire against your vertebrae. One false move and you'll awaken a miniature ecosystem of bedbugs, fleas, and possibly a distant cousin of the common mouse. The mattress emits an audible creak every time you shift, as though protesting your very existence. If you're not careful, you might lodge a wayward feather in your armpit, or worse, uncover something that used to be food but has evolved far past its expiration date. The morning air is thick, stale, and entirely unbothered by the concept of fresh linens. Sunbeams creep in through a cracked window and highlight a fine, motley film of dust motes, nature's confetti shower, celebrating your survival. Reaching for the blanket, which carries more patches than original fabric, you weigh its warmth against the very real possibility that it harbours secrets best left uncovered. To wrap up means to risk. To let go means shivering until your toes lose all feeling. Every muscle complains as you sit up, vertebrae crackling like a medieval fireplace. The straw pokes through the thin ticking, and you suspect you can identify last autumn's harvest by scent alone. Your pillow, a generous term, has lost all will to provide comfort, instead offering the sensation of sleeping atop a moist sandbag. You try to coax some shape into it, and in the process, a cloud of unidentified pillow debris wafts up, adding a touch of texture to the morning palette. It's not only the furniture that's seen better days. The chamber itself mirrors your bedding's glorious history. Walls stained from centuries of candle soot, wooden beams dark with the accumulated tales of people who snored, fretted, and sneezed here long before you. The floorboards greet your bare feet with a shock of cold and an urgent warning about splinters. You realize, suddenly and completely, that the luxury of slippers is a distant dream, right up there with indoor plumbing and functional alarm clocks. Across the room, light struggles through warped glass, glancing off the battered washstand. It's water, left overnight, offers either an ice bath or, in summer, a tepid soup flecked with mysterious surface floaters. You contemplate your reflection in a scratched, faintly tarnished mirror, and it contemplates you back, exhausted, rumpled, and not entirely convinced this new day thing is worth the effort. Yet, there's a humble dignity in this daily ordeal. Even beneath the weight of musty, hand-me-down covers, you're part of a secret club. Those who master the art of making do. You learn to spot the softest patches of straw, optimize blanket distribution, and perform an Olympic-level acrobatic stretch just to avoid the particularly aggressive lump near your left hip. Mastering this bed is a badge of honor. Surviving its nightly hazards, a tale to retell at dinner. Every sound in the room is amplified in the hush of dawn. The drip from a leaky roof, the scurry of tiny feet behind the wainscot. Each detail urges you upright, fueled by the promise that anything awaiting you outside this bed will surely be an improvement. As you prepare to meet the day, battered but undefeated, you glance back at your resting place, a loyal adversary promising the same nightly battle and strange, straw-filled comfort when dusk falls again. Welcome to the waking hour in a bed that's witnessed centuries. If you manage to rise unscathed and reasonably alert, you've already won. The rest of the day can only get better. First things first, nature calls, and so does your chamber pot. The aroma greets you with a historical vigor, a bouquet of last night's banquet, and the unmistakable whiff of old money. Literally. You could open a window, but why would you, when your wealth means you can pay a servant to haul it away and spread it on your prize roses? Like clockwork, the morning procession begins. Your loyal attendant glides in, eyes carefully averted from your royal disarray, bearing a practiced stoicism honed by years of such olfactory trials. Armed with a porcelain vessel and what can only be described as a grin and bear it philosophy, he executes the daily handoff. There's an art to not looking directly at the contents. Some say it's one of the few skills that separates the seasoned upper-tier manservant from the mere novice. The chamber pot itself is a subtle reflection of your status. A refined ceramic decorated with family crests, lions, and perhaps even a cherub who looks eternally alarmed by the bowl's true function. Unlike the humble privy used by commoners out in the yard, this is a mobile monument to comfort, untouched by weather or prying eyes. Of course, the irony is not lost on you. The more lavish the household, the more elaborate the struggles with what to do about yesterday's wine-soaked supper. The rituals around the chamber pot are as much a part of your morning as the stretching of limbs or the first mouthful of honeyed bread. In these moments, the boundaries between luxury and the humdrum indignities of human existence blur. You might catch yourself humming a tune, perhaps a waltz, while your servant shoulders the porcelain and backs away, careful not to slosh or spill. The sound of the pot lid clinking shut is as routine and familiar as the peal of the breakfast bell. And then comes a subtle dance of etiquette and social standing. For while your own chamber pot is spirited away in near silence, your less fortunate cousins might have to face the ordeal themselves, balancing the sloshing weight and their own dignity down a chilly corridor to be emptied discreetly into the garden or, if luck allows, the house's relatively new indoor closet. For the upper echelons, this is not merely waste disposal. It's a performance of affluence, a sign of a life where you are forever protected from the crude mechanics of your own biology by the loyal service of others. Yet, nothing ever truly disappears. The collected chamber pots of the household eventually converge in the mysterious realm of the scullery, or are redirected with haphazard enthusiasm to the kitchen garden. Here, the circle of life asserts itself in vegetable beds, where your roses bloom with suspicious exuberance, and the chef's prized leeks owe their girth, in no small part, to a potent morning ritual. It's an ecosystem built on privilege and pragmatism, convenience and compost. Breakfast conversation always stops briefly if a servant is unlucky enough to pass through with a freshly laden pot en route to purification duties. Poor fellow, someone murmurs over coffee, with the faintest edge of relief. Morning letters, fresh bread, and scandal are all on the table. Just don't mention the roses on the sideboard. Still, there's a sense of continuity to it all. This is what it means to live in the 18th century aristocracy. Even your most private moments become part of the daily choreography, a waltz performed to the music of necessity, status, and the enduring problem of what to do with yesterday's leftovers. In the end, you return to your routine, leaving delicate matters in the capable, uncelebrated hands of your household staff. The chamber pot waltz is over for now, ready to begin again tomorrow. Because as any experienced noble knows, history is not just made in grand ballrooms, but in quiet porcelain, behind closed doors. Sliding into your velvet doublet, you're enveloped in perfumes, mothballs, and whatever the apprentice dropped last wash day, because hygiene is all about out of sight, out of nostril. Each layer traps more of last year's adventures, from spilled mulled wine to the faintest trace of that time. You tried archery. But let's not underestimate the art of dressing in layers. For a denizen of medieval Europe, clothing isn't just about warmth or status, though it certainly shouts both. It's survival gear, social spreadsheet, and olfactory misdirection all bundled into a slightly itchy woolen package. A linen shirt serves as the first line of defense, bravely sacrificing itself as a sweat and grime buffer so your outerwear doesn't turn into a biohazard. Of course, this shirt stays on for days, sometimes weeks, before it sees so much as a rinse, since laundering is a labour-intensive team sport, best left for sunny weeks and strong stomachs. Next comes your hose, woolen, snug, and as prone to sagging as your enthusiasm by mid-winter. Are they practical? Mostly. Comfortable? Only if you've given up on the concept. But hose ensure you're fully covered, because modesty rules are strict. A glimpse of bare knee registers somewhere between a personal scandal and a local headline. And so, you shuffle along, clutching and tugging, hoping no one notices your left stocking, slowly embarking on its own adventure. Then there are the layers that announce your place in the social pecking order. Over the linen, perhaps a tunic trimmed with fur, real or fake, depending on your fortunes, or who you're attempting to impress at the market. Sumptuary laws dictate what colours and fabrics you can wear, so your outer cape isn't just a fashion statement, it's legal compliance. That forbidden crimson velvet, it's 1 part luxury, 2 parts risk of a fine, and a dash of delicious rebellion for those who love to flout the rules and show off their connections to that wealthy uncle in Lombardy. Of course, no discussion of layers is complete without mentioning the grand finale, the outer coat, cloak, or gown. These are prone to accumulating every possible environmental souvenir: mud from the street, bits of hay from a hasty seat on a wagon, and a periodic dusting of flour if you pass too close to the baker's boys. If you're lucky, or unlucky, enough to have inherited your father's cloak, it bears the unmistakable patina of family history. A faint whiff of his pipe smoke, patched up knife slits from that one robber night incident, and mysterious brownish stains you're advised not to question. But what about scent? Contrary to popular belief, medieval folk did care about how they smelled, even if they had creative interpretations of freshness. Herbs and flower petals tucked into garments do their valiant best against persistent odours. Sage, lavender, rosemary, all pressed into service alongside sachets fastened to belts or tucked under hats. Perfumery was big business. A few drops dabbed on a wrist or a pomander carried on a chain for the truly cautious. And while the upper classes experimented with imported musks and sandalwoods, the average person stuck to the honest but pungent local bouquet: sweat, smoke, tallow candles, and a hopeful sprig of mint. All these layers, physical and aromatic, don't just warm the body. They signal your prosperity, your occupation, and just how devoted you are to waging the constant battle between proud presentation and reality's persistent grime. In short, medieval layering wasn't for the faint of heart or faint of nose. With every extra tunic or spritz of rosewater, you built a buffer between yourself and the world. Fresheners armor and sent the first line of defense. And if you ever wondered why medieval folk always seemed to be posing for portraits out in the open air, now you know. Even the best layers need, occasionally, a strong breeze. Your enormous wig, powdered to oblivion, sits atop your head like a throne for head lice. Perfumed with lavender, rose oil, and just enough animal fat to terrify a vegetarian, your hairpiece is the ultimate status signal. It also doubles as a mobile petsui sting tinzu. But what exactly lurks beneath this flamboyant feline habitat perched on your dome? To the uninitiated, it's merely a tangle of curls and pomp. Yet the connoisseur knows there's a meticulous, albeit deranged, science beneath the spectacle. French aristocrats didn't do things halfway. If nature was stingy with hairlines or bald spots, artifice made up the difference, one sturdy horsehair fibre at a time. Every wig began with a patient horse, or more commonly, a less patient goat, surrendering its dignity by degree. Sometimes, even one's own servants supplied snippings, elevating serving your master to a new and deeply personal level. The construction process was nothing short of Baroque engineering. Imagine row upon row of curls, each one baked and set in special ovens, lacquered into submission, and stitched onto a sturdy linen foundation. Every loop was a testament to the persistence of the craftsman, and possibly the craftsman's desire to never work in wig making again. Some wigs reached heights and weights previously reserved for small dogs. Tête-à-tête. Tête-à-tête wasn't just a conversation, it was a full-on architecture critique. Maintenance was as much a ritual as any religious observance. First came the powdering, a merry-go-round of starch, flour, and exotic fragrances, launched at your scalp with the subtlety of a hailstorm. The goal was not merely to appear less greasy, a lost cause, but to gleam with the matte luminosity of a porcelain statue. Servants wore masks to avoid asphyxiation. If the powder got in your eyes, simply weep nobly and blame it on the cost of living. Of course, the wig became a nesting ground for all manner of interlopers. Lice, mites, the occasional drunken moth. Some enterprising souls invented scratch sticks, slender ivory rods you could use to address urgent scalp issues mid-conversation. Social events were often punctuated with elaborate, surreptitious head-scratching choreography, so refined that outsiders believed it a secret handshake among the peerage. The wig's sheer size invited creative innovation. Storing keepsakes. Tuck a love letter or coin in the ample underbrush. Need a snack? Hide a sugar plum or two in the fortress of curls for later. Some of the more theatrical types planted entire model gardens up there. Tiny mechanical birds, fruit arrangements, even military ships, proudly sailing the saline seas of pomade and powder. If an acquaintance had something particularly jaw-dropping atop their wig, you knew they were plotting a social coup. All this was performed in the service of one fundamental truth. The bigger the wig, the bigger your ambitions or insecurities. The grandest wigs were veritable sculptures, designed to stun. If one's neck muscles could bear the strain for an entire evening, it was a badge of honor, or a sign the physiotherapist was on retainer. Yet, for all its absurdity, the wig was both armor and invitation. It protected your reputation, shielded your actual hair, or lack thereof, and declared, unapologetically, to the world, here is someone to whom the rules of gravity, reason, and normal hygiene do not apply. At least not until fashion changed. And when it did, the wig would be cast aside with as little ceremony as yesterday's scandal. So next time you spot a powdery beast on an 18th century head in a museum portrait, remember, you're not just looking at a hairstyle. You're witnessing the apex of social theatre, a triumph of human invention, and perhaps the earliest known case of go big or go home. You join your family for a breakfast of boiled meat and hard bread. The air is ripe with the mingling scents of feet, body heat, and the fine cheese no one realizes has spoiled, because frankly, everything already smells a little spoiled. You wedge yourself onto the narrow bench, making as little contact with the slightly sticky tabletop as possible. What passes for etiquette is simply not wiping your nose with the bread. Conversations hover just above whispers, punctuated by the clatter of mugs and the scrape of wooden utensils against tin plates. Your sister makes a face as she bites into her bread, the crust so hard you wonder if it might actually be last night's. Your mother's expression suggests she's pretending the broth is richer than it is. There's a calm determination in her eyes as she chews, each bite a small victory. Above it all, the pervasive morning stench lingers. Feet that haven't bathed in weeks, unless you count puddles. The combined fug of damp wool and bodies packed tightly through the night. The churn of old milk in ceramic mugs. And that cheese, oh God, the cheese, proudly displayed in the middle of the table, oozing just a little more than it did yesterday. You catch your brother stealthily sniffing the cheese before daring to cut a sliver. He shrugs, a silent signal that it's just edible enough, or that he'll eat anything if it means not being hungry. The neighbour's children argue over a cup of weak ale, which is probably safer than the water. Meanwhile, your uncle tries to lighten the mood with a joke, something involving a pig, a priest, and a potato. No one laughs. If anything, the silence deepens as the scent of boiled onions wafts in from next door. In this cramped, candle-lit corner, you could almost imagine that breakfast is a feast. If you keep your nose pointed firmly away from the window, where the chamber pot fumes drift up the wall. You try, gamely, to eat quickly. If you're lucky, you'll get a bite of the meat before your cousin nicks it from your plate. She has fast hands, a survival trait in this house. Each meal is a negotiation. Whispered bargains for the last bite of broth. Promises to trade chores later for a chunk of apple. Dried, shriveled, and treasured like gold. The oldest at the table takes the biggest portion. The youngest whines and often gets the leftovers. And the middle children, like you, learn to be quick and quiet if they want to eat well. All the while, a low, sour fog of smells clings to the room. You realize, with a mix of resignation and pride, that to outsiders, this would be unbearable. But to you, these smells are as familiar as your own heartbeat. Proof you're alive, your family is together, and today is, at the very least, ordinary. Food is precious, yes, but mealtime is also a shared ritual. Half nourishment, half family roll call. Your mother glances around, quietly noting who's here, who looks well, who might need a little extra. There's a kind of comfort in the routine, even when it reeks. What would it feel like, you wonder, to eat at a clean table, surrounded by fresh air? You'll probably never know. For now, you follow everyone's example, dipping the brick-hard bread into the greasy broth, letting it soak up enough to soften before you risk your teeth. When breakfast ends, the dishes are scooped up and rinsed with yesterday's water. The cheese is wrapped and stashed for tomorrow. And the stench, well, that never really leaves. You step outside, blinking into the morning light, a half-full belly and a deep breath of comparatively fresh air marking the official start of your day. And as you walk away from the stinky table, you realize, whether life brings you feasts or famine, it's these smells you'll remember most. Washing up means splashing some rose water on your hands and face. The goal isn't cleanliness, just plausible deniability. If anyone asks, you've freshened up. If anyone can smell you coming, well, that's just your signature. Let's be clear. The morning routine here is less about hygiene, more about ritual. Forget imported soaps and hot running water. Here, ablution is a luxury word for a 2-minute negotiation with a ceramic pitcher that's seen better centuries. The vessel sits, squat and judgmental, on a battered table. Its contents, tepid and suspiciously cloudy, are a leap of faith. You glance at the rosewater bottle, a rare indulgence, and drizzle it in for good measure. Does it help? Not with the germs, but the scent provokes optimistic comments from relatives passing by. Ah, smells like a wedding. Never mind that the rest of you smells like last week's onions and the wool blanket you haven't washed since the last full moon. The trick is all in the wrist. Too vigorous a splash and the water finds every seam in your sleeve, marking you with soggy evidence. Too delicate, and you risk emerging, looking just as you did before, rumpled, dusted, and questionably awake. The sweet spot is a businesslike slap. Water, rose water, maybe a wipe with a handkerchief that's seen as much of life as you have. For the truly enterprising, a hasty comb through the hair. Done, you say to your reflection in a cracked mirror. Ready for anything, but really ready for breakfast. Beneath the performative washing, there's a careful choreography of modesty and expediency. Doors creak open. A sister passes, averting her gaze with well-practiced discretion. Privacy is a myth, so you do your best with strategic angles and a towel clamped between teeth. The hope? To look sufficiently presentable to escape the endless questions from older relatives. Is that how you'll go out in the world? Is that a shirt or a rug? Every comment is an invitation to self-doubt. And perhaps another slap of rosewater, just to be safe. Soap, if it appears at all, is called upon as a last resort. One cracked bar is shared among several people, its scent reminiscent of both lemons and disappointment. It dissolves faster than you remember, slicking your palms in a brief, futile rebellion against the dust that settles back within minutes. Still, you lather, rinse, and dry on the least offensive end of the communal towel, then shake out your hands as if flicking away the doubts of morning. There's always the final inspection. An aunt or uncle drops by, peering with the discerning eye of a seasoned customs officer. They sniff, they squint, they might even reach out to pat your cheek, test for dampness, as if that validates your entire existence. If you pass, you receive a tight nod. If not, you're sent back, grumbling, for a second rinse. False alarms are common. Sometimes the day's dirt is just too persistent. You surrender, embracing your minor grime as evidence of a life well lived, or at least well survived. Ultimately, clean isn't a state. It's an aspiration, renewed each morning with a few drops of rosewater and the stubborn hope that you can fool both family and fate. The lingering scent might impress exactly no one, but it's better than nothing. And after all, there are battles to fight today, arguments to win, chores to escape, laughter, and secrets to share. Who has time for more than a symbolic scrub? So you straighten your shoulders, step into the day's light, and present yourself to the world, washed, if only theoretically, and ready for whatever comes. Because in this house, plausible deniability is the real fragrance of morning. Your servants are everywhere, fanning, scrubbing, Febrezing with bouquets, and generally absorbing 80% of the ambient funk. It's the trickle-down economy of odour, a true mark of upper-class living. But as much as their presence signals privilege, the lived reality of those who serve remains largely invisible, their silent labour smoothing the edges of every aristocratic day. The word servant itself is coated in distant politeness, a sanitised stand-in for a life spent in the margins, always present, yet never truly seen. Their footsteps, muffled along stone corridors, synchronise to a rhythm dictated by distant bells, a soft ring for tea, a hard clang for crisis, an impatient jangle for everything in between. In the grand houses, servants are ghosts during the hours of polite company. The household code is clear, efficient, unobtrusive, and almost magical in their ability to vanish at the precise moment a guest turns their head. If they speak, it's in tones honed soft by deference, the words polished by generations of caution. Their hands may be cracked, their backs bent, but their countenance is fixed in that delicate, ambiguous smile, the expressionless mask worn by those trained never to reveal how they really feel. The irony, of course, is that the master's comfort is so inextricably bound to the servant's discomfort. Comfort becomes a zero-sum game. The newly pressed linens and gleaming floors are the indirect byproducts of 12-hour shifts and dawn spent scrubbing soot from the iron fireplace. Every fragrant bouquet arranged for the lady of the house masks a half-hour scraping mud from the flower beds at sunrise. There are pecking orders, even among the servants. The butler reigns over the pantry. The housemaid bows to the cook, and everyone lives in awe of the housekeeper, the undisputed general of the downstairs domain. Suffering, too, is codified, institutionalized, and somehow banal. It isn't only exhaustion or paltry wages. Sometimes it's just the simple erosion of self that comes from answering to a bell, from belonging to a house not your own. There's a quiet pride in well-folded towels, but also a hollowness in knowing you'll never be thanked, rarely be named, and almost never be heard. It's service as a form of erasure. The better the job is done, the less likely its doer will be noticed at all. Take the morning routine. Before the household stirs, a silent army descends. Fires lit while frost still ghosts the windows, water heated and hauled upstairs in copper cans, breakfast trays assembled with military precision. Only when all is immaculate and the smell of toast floats gently through the east wing do the family's footsteps begin to echo above. Even during festivities, the supposed high points of noble life, the suffering is at its most acute. Balls and dinners mean endless refills, hurried giggles in the corridor, and frantic attempts to fix a gentleman's wine-stained waistcoat. The guests will remember only the glamour. The staff will remember aching calves and the weight of a silver tray balanced all night long. Yet beneath all this, among the broom closets and the attics, flickers a sense of solidarity, a banter as dry as the sherry they pour, small acts of rebellion like a stolen lump of sugar or a deftly plucked blossom. There is dignity in endurance, camaraderie in shared hardship, and hope, in spite of everything, in the promise of a life, however modest, shaped by their own hands. In the end, the servant's suffering is the house's secret ingredient, silently flavouring every comfort, every spotless floor, and every breath of sweet-scented air. The true aroma of affluence, after all, is less about lilies or lavender, and more about the people, often unseen, who carry the fragrance of every day on their tired, uncelebrated backs. Every room bursts with sachets, lavender, rosemary, dried rose petals. You shove them everywhere. Drawers, closets, even your deepest pockets. It'll never be enough. But maybe, just maybe, you can keep the cheese and foot part of the palace at bay until lunch. Of course, you're fully aware this is little more than a perfumed bandage slapped over a pitiless wound. It's not that nobody washes. There's a ritual to that, certainly, but warm water isn't always easy to come by, and even less so when your job is to tend to the endless tapestries, weary lords, and even wearier dogs. The raw persistency of medieval life sets into the walls themselves. So, the nobles turn to scented sachets in the hope that enough lavender might drown out centuries of must. And who makes these sachets? Not the lords and ladies themselves. You do, alongside your fellow chamber servants. It's a constant choreography. Bundles of dried herbs dangling from rafters, baskets of veined petals sorted by patient, calloused fingers, rosemary for clarity, lavender for calm, dried mint to masquerade as clean. Spices like cloves and nutmeg imported at wild cost from distant lands, so precious they are counted out one by one. The sachets themselves are sewn from scraps of sturdy, faded linen, because only the delicate stuff goes into the family's garb. There's a method in the madness. Each flower and herb is chosen for a purpose, and recipes are hotly debated in every scullery and chamber. Rose with bay, not marjoram. It's less sharp. You might stuff a sachet more heavily for the Lord's bedchamber and go easy on the valerian elsewhere. Too much, and someone will nod off mid-council. Over time, some superstitions tangle in with the science. A handful of rue to ward off plague miasmas, or a pinch of wormwood if the dog's been sick in the hall again. Sachets are more than fragrance. They're a form of armor. The way you tuck one into your shift's sleeve before entering the great hall is like going into battle armed, though your enemies are sweat-soaked wool, damp rushes, and the collective breath of 100 unwashed bodies. The sachets act as subtle signals too. A sudden waft of cosmery might mean someone hopes to be noticed, while a bold handkerchief of sage usually points to a servant bustling about with something vital, or with gossip. And what a gossip engine they power. The scullery maids are never quiet, always swapping sachet secrets. Whispers abound. Did Lord Geoffrey run out of rosemary, and does that explain his brusqueness this morning? Will Lady Isabeau's rose and lavender blend finally charm the visiting count? Wagering on these tiny battles of scent is a secret sport. A sachet accidentally dropped in the wrong chamber can be a scandalous statement. But for all the intrigue, there's comfort in the routine. You love most the early mornings, when the corridors are cool, and you have a moment to yourself sorting and blending, crushing petals between your fingers, releasing scent and memory. For you, the perfume pouches become personal talismans, anchors in a world defined by shifts and shadows. As the day rolls on, however, the sachets are eventually overrun, valiantly masking but never erasing the less-than-royal odours that come with crowded halls, candle smoke, and wet dogs darting beneath banquet tables. They remind you with wry predictability that a palace is, after all, just a collection of people, human, fallible, and unfathomably smelly. Yet, as you pass a pouch under your nose, even if it's only for a second, you find a whisper of what nobility hopes for: refinement, grace, and a fleeting escape from the world's relentless, obnoxious embrace. Let me know if you'd like to adjust the blend of humour, history, or detail. You spritz yourself with a mixture of musk, ambergris, and civet. Yes, that's animal gland juice, creating a scent so powerful it could clear a room faster than a confession of bankruptcy. But hey, you're anointed. Let's be honest, Perfume has always been less about subtlety and more about announcing your presence before your opinions catch up. In ancient times, Cleopatra reportedly sailed up the Nile with perfume sails, ensuring Mark Antony was smitten long before she set sandal on deck. Fast forward to today, and your elevator ride becomes an olfactory declaration of intent, part warning, part invitation, part chemical warfare. Why do we willingly marinate ourselves in complicated mixtures that whisper jasmine and scream chemical spill? Because the right fragrance, for better or worse, can make you unforgettable. There's a reason why entire romantic liaisons and career trajectories can hinge on a signature scent. For some, it's the final brushstroke before heading out, a sensory force field to disguise anxiety, lack of shower, or just to say, yes, I did spend $200 to smell like a mysterious forest. Science, never one to leave a mystery unsniffed, informs us that scent is the sense most closely linked to memory and emotion. That's why one whiff of Grandma's rose perfume can transport you back to childhood faster than any Instagram throwback. But beware, sometimes, weapon of mass distraction isn't hyperbole. Odor fatigue is real. After a few minutes, you may stop smelling yourself, but the rest of the world isn't so lucky. Thus enters the delicate dance of public spaces. Who gets to inflict their scent on the collective nose? Of course, every bottle is a tiny act of rebellion against the mundane. You're not just dabbing fragrance, you're time-traveling to a smoky Parisian jazz club or conjuring a lost lover in a Sardinian orchard. You're proclaiming, I may have forgotten my keys and left my phone in a cab, but by God, I smell intentional. Let's not forget the bravado involved in wearing some of the old classics. Brass knuckle fragrances like Chanel No. 5 or Shalimar weren't designed for the shrinking violet. Apply correctly, and you're the life of the party. Overdo it, and you're the reason. Windows get opened in January. Perfume, therefore, is both art and judgment call, a ritual that invites as much trepidation as excitement. And then there's the social tightrope. Too little, and you risk anonymous blandness. Too much, and you amplify your presence to comic book villain levels. There are tomes of advice, pulse points, never rub, and above all, remember, that cloud should be a whisper, not a foghorn. Yet, even as trends shift to clean scents and less is more philosophies, there's still something seductive about a perfectly pitched waft. A good perfume isn't just an accessory, it's confidence in a bottle. In romantic comedies, it's the moment the love interest looks up, intrigued. In real life, it's the security blanket you loan yourself before a job interview, a date, or a disaster. Ultimately, scent is the only adornment that defies sight, touch, and even sound. It's invisible armor, a secret handshake between skin and memory. To be remembered for your smell, good or bad, is a legacy all its own. So, as you stride out, trailed by the fragrant concoction you chose from among 100 contenders, remember, you wield the power not only to distract, but also to command attention, evoke emotions, and create something truly unforgettable, if not always universally appreciated. In the game of presence, a well-placed scent can be your most surprising ally, or your most dramatic exit cue. Use it wisely. Now here's. Heading out to the long drop, you pass tapestries doused in perfume, meant to hide everything from damp mold to the regrettable results of alchemy. The air here is a complex fugue of old monastery and forgotten laundry. You step lightly, mindful of ancient flagstones worn smooth not by time alone, but by generations of hurried feet in desperate search for relief. The hallway narrows, picking up a chill that gnaws through your velvet slippers, Here, the tapestry colours fade and the wall sconces flicker nervously, as if wary of where you're headed. At the end of the corridor, a heavy oak door stands sentinel. The carvings on its face, grotesques and twining branches, carry more meaning on this occasion than any illuminated manuscript, for they herald the sanctuary, if one can call it that, of the privy. You lift the latch, its cold iron bite, a subtle penalty for all the indulgences at the last feast. Inside, the throne awaits, a battered wooden bench with a smooth crescent opening, hinting at centuries of noble posteriors. A stained velvet cushion has been provided, either as an act of kindness or an afterthought from the last earl. Looking skyward, and wisely not downward, you spot a battered window attempting to let in fresh air, but mostly just ushering in the persistent moan of the wind. It is a strange paradox that so elegant a household should bear such a humble, almost primitive necessity. Yet, here hierarchy is momentarily dissolved. Dukes and chambermaids alike find themselves pondering the masonry, every difference flattened by the universal realities of digestion. The privy, in truth, is the medieval equalizer. You are grateful for the scented rushes, today's blend heavy on lavender and surviving rose petals, meant to ward off the less poetic fragrances wafting upward. Sometimes, you imagine the alchemist next door, mixing potions not for health or wealth, but in secret hope of inventing true indoor plumbing. Alas, all that's on offer today is cold stone and a determined breeze. There is, of course, a ritual to a nobleman's visit. Etiquette manuals say to hum softly or knock before entering, lest you stumble upon a political rival mid-contemplation. Servants, ever discreet, loiter just outside earshot, waiting with fresh water or, on truly grand occasions, a handful of mint leaves. As you arrange your garments with as much dignity as possible, you recall the court poet's observation. All men must yield to the call, yet only the wise do so in silence. Wise words indeed, particularly here, where every echo from below carries the potential for rumour. Once finished, you step onto the cold tiles, adjusting your doublet as if nothing out of the ordinary has transpired. The tapestries, still bravely fragrant, guide your return journey. Perhaps now you can appreciate their gallant struggle against the inevitable, these tokens of civilization, waging a silent campaign against medieval reality. This is your brief respite. A return, if not triumphant, then at least unscathed, to the bustle and pretend elegance of the great hall. For a few moments, you are no longer the master of lands or mistress of ceremonies, but simply a survivor of the privy. A small victory, celebrated anew each day, in every great house across the land. The barber arrives, razor in hand, breath laced with clove and despair. He's here for beard maintenance, and maybe bloodletting, which, incidentally, is the cleanest part of your week, if only because he wipes the blade in wine. He sets his leather satchel on the edge of your straw mattress, snapping it open to reveal tools that look half surgical, half stolen from a butcher. Gleaming steel scissors, a slender blade, a chunky brass syringe with a chipped handle, and, best not to think about it, a pile of suspiciously stained cloths. The barber says little. He's perfected a silence that feels at once professional and ominous. His eyes flick to your neck, your wrists, the scruff on your chin, calculating. You settle onto a three-legged stool as he tucks a cloth around your shoulders and sloshes wine over the razor. The scent of yesterday's revelries, briefly masking the odour of boiled linen and tallow. With a practiced touch, he pinches your chin, tilts your face skyward, and draws the blade in steady, deliberate strokes down your cheek. It's a strange intimacy. The brush of his thumb, the scrape of metal, the gentle exhale as he concentrates. There's trust, because you have no other choice. Barber surgeons, in this world, mend bodies as often as they shear beards. You've seen him reset a broken finger with the same nonchalance as snipping split ends. He complains the pay is better for a shave than for stitching wounds. He jokes, dryly, that no one complains about a bad haircut once they've fainted from blood loss. You smile, tightly. Of all the medieval encounters you endure, these visits stand out for their peculiar blend of comfort and threat. The barber offers homegrown remedies between strokes. Nettle tea strengthens the blood, he grunts, or keep sage under your tongue for the toothache. He is folk medicine in roughshod boots, his knowledge half inherited, half compiled from village hearsay. He pulls at your arm, examining the crook of your elbow. The time has come for bloodletting. Once, you protested. Now you know resistance extends the ordeal. He ties a strip of linen, draws it tight, and gestures for you to make a fist. When the blade bites, it's sharp and precise, a line of crimson beads against your skin, and the barber watches the flow with clinical detachment, counting heartbeats. There, he declares, enough for the humours to balance. The small mercy is that he's swift, and the wine stings less than it could. When he's finished, he presses a patch of old wool to your arm and binds it with more linen. He dabs at your neck with a rag, studies his work, and nods. It might almost be approval. Now he collects his tools, each one cleaned or, at least, wiped free of visible evidence. No soup tonight, he warns. Broth only. Avoid onions, unless you fancy another visit. As he stands to leave, he offers you a quick, crooked grin, whether it's pride in a job well done or a promise to return. You cannot say. His silhouette lingers by the door. For a moment, he's just a kindly figure, a necessary presence. But as the candle sputters and shadows reclaim the room, you remember, in the world of the barber surgeon, the line between healer and harm is as thin as the razor's edge. Let me know if you want adjustments to the style, tone, or focus. The Palace Herb Garden is only mostly herbal. In reality, it's a half-hearted attempt to mask the holes in the hygiene system. You pluck a sprig of sage for your pocket. It will battle valiantly against your personal atmosphere and lose by lunch. The first impression, lushness, greenery climbing every wall, parsley spilling out of planters, basil wilting in the sun-mottled gloom. But the closer you look, the rougher the illusion. Mint grows alongside mould. Lavender fights a losing war against suspicious brown patches. The moist warmth, ideal for nurturing seedlings, is also paradise for flies. There are more secret lives unfolding under one wilted leaf than there are courtiers in the ballroom. The sense of herbal refreshment is more aspiration than reality. A palace never smells like a woodland meadow. It smells like the people who never leave it, multiplied by the crisis of plumbing that is both under-engineered and overused. The garden is the equivalent of a desperate stroll through the kitchen spice rack. Courtiers pass by and pinch a leaf or two, tucking them in sleeves and bodices, hoping for aromatic protection in a world where, objectively, nothing smells good after 3 weeks of closed windows and political intrigue. The gardening staff, if you can call them that, are an anxious trio who know their true job is odour containment, not horticulture. Their toolkit, cracked terracotta pots, broken watering cans, sharp eyes, peeled for drooping stems, and, if all else fails, an emergency bowl of vinegar to absorb the worst offences. They know that every time the wind shifts through the hallways, their failures are broadcast in waves. In whispered tones, new arrivals are advised. Avoid the potted rosemary near the west arch. It's covering something sinister. Naturally, alchemy and superstition mingle in the humid air. It's said that if you place thyme under your tongue before a tense court meeting, you'll be protected from treachery. Sage is for wisdom. Basil for luck at dice. Rosemary to remember the way to your own room after too much mead. Somewhere in the shadows, someone's always reaching for the parsley, hoping for an herbal shield, or perhaps simply hoping for anything at all. The garden's true purpose, however, emerges during moments of collective panic. A bad stew day, an unexpected heatwave, or the arrival of a new ambassador can prompt a flurry of activity. Someone will crush handfuls of mint into water and splash it over the flagstones in the desperate hope that this, finally, will be the aromatic breakthrough everyone's praying for. The kitchen will start incorporating every available herb into that night's meal, an act of culinary misdirection meant to keep noses guessing and complaints at bay. Evening falls, and the garden's shadows become a conspiratorial thicket. Here, secrets are exchanged, and tiny betrayals take root among the carrot tops and fading marigolds. Every plant conceals a possible eavesdropper, or a hidden note, or a lover on an errand of perfume-based mercy. The garden's herbs are drafted into service as currency, a scrap of mint for a rumour, a sprig of tarragon for a favour, dandelion greens pressed into a letter as the ultimate olive branch, though dandelion is not, technically, an herb. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the garden sighing in resignation. Those noble plants, bred for cleaner, brighter places, only dream of fresh air and rainfall. Instead, they labour quietly through the endless cycle of staleness and perfumed panic that defines palace life. Still, there's a certain dignity in their doomed battle, a reminder that even in the least likely of places, something green and hopeful can endure. Tomorrow, the sage will be replaced, the mint watered, and the cycle begins anew. Hope against the inevitable, humour against disaster. A green thumb raised defiantly at the encroaching funk. Afternoon means a parade of gowns and suits stuffed with perfume sachets, pomanders swinging from wrists, and so much sweaty velvet that you're basically inhaling a century's worth of elite ambition. Dancing becomes a feat of stamina, nostril strength, and selective breathing. As you edge into the grand ballroom, the temperature hits you like a physical presence, a musky wall perfumed with rosewater, and the sharp, intermittent tang of camphor. The chandeliers blaze above, flinging light across acres of gilded moulding and turning every forehead into a polished pearl. At first, it's dazzling, a living painting, all rich brocades and rippling silk, powdered, wigs slightly askew from exertion, faces flushed more from effort than romance. But after the third quadrille, an ordeal of bows, spins, and nervous curtsies, cracks begin to show. You notice the first signs of fatigue among the crowd. Ladies fan themselves with painted feathers, pretending demure interest in the conversation, but their eyes dart hungrily toward open windows and servants carrying chilled drinks. Gentlemen, cloaked in layers of velvet and lace, try not to wilt as they dab at their temples. Discreetly, of course, to avoid looking defeated before the next polonaise. A few of the older guests have perfected the art of appearing spirited, while secretly counting the minutes until supper. All around, the incessant swish and scrape of slippers on the waxed parquet forms a kind of rhythm, steps counted, partners changed, a ritual performed. But this is not just a spectacle, this is a battlefield. Dancers trade glances that mix camaraderie and competition. Whose stamina will crack first? Whose smile will hold or falter during the next demanding minuet? That certain dark patch spreading across the back of Lord Ellingsworth's coat is a badge of perseverance in this most genteel of marathons. Even the air seems to buckle under the weight of expectations. Behind every practiced gesture, every flutter of the hand or formal smile, there's a running tally of court alliances and rivalries. The ballroom is its own ecosystem. Gossip carries on the currents between sets of dances, and alliances are forged and broken over the span of a turn around the floor. Yet, there's also a sort of unity forged in mutual discomfort. Shared suffering breeds strange loyalties, and tonight, everyone is, by necessity, part of the same shimmery, overdressed herd. Between the grand phrases of a Strauss waltz and the thunderous footstomps marking a mazurka, bits of real laughter occasionally bubble up. A lady lets slip a sarcastic aside about the pleasures of corsetry. Her friend barely stifles a snort. For an instant, the rigid choreography of the ballroom dissolves, just long enough for pretension to give way to something human. Sweat, fatigue, and maybe even joy, despite it all. The musicians, sequestered on their gallery, press on mercilessly, fiddles flying, oblivious or immune to the slow-motion undoing happening on the floor below. They set the rhythm, and everyone else must keep up. Etiquette demanding not just competence, but endurance, stylish suffering as social proof. As the line for refreshment lengthens and a few brave souls sneak out onto the balcony, a silent truce emerges. It's okay, just for a minute, to lean against the cool stone and inhale the promise of evening air. Later, when supper is finally announced, the surge toward the doors is less a migration than a jubilant escape. The ballroom empties like a receding tide, leaving behind a residue of crushed petals, abandoned fans, and the lingering echo of a string, quartet's last heroic chord. And yet, as the evening hushes, there's already the next round to anticipate. For in the grand ballroom, endurance is its own ticket. Tonight, and every night inside these velvet-draped, rose-scented walls, you flirt from a measured distance, holding a handkerchief laced with jasmine beneath your nose. If a suitor approaches too closely, well, that's what strategically placed fans are for. Under the watchful eyes of chaperones, often more interested than they let on, each glance becomes an act of rebellion. Every glimmer of eye contact a tiny victory in an elaborate dance. You become fluent in gestures, a carefully timed flutter of the lashes, the gentle but deliberate adjustment of your skirts, the briefest incline of your head as you acknowledge a compliment. No words must pass unfiltered, nor intentions be worn openly. In drawing rooms with busy wallpaper, amidst the constant swirl of conversation and perfume, proximity itself becomes the language of desire. The choreography of courtship, its gliding layered steps, demands patience. The surreptitious passing of folded notes, fingers brushing as you reach for the same glass, the covert sharing of fans inscribed with cryptic signals. Each act is imbued with possibility. You learn to savor the tension rather than curse it, knowing that every boundary, every rule, only adds to the frisson. The anticipation is the point. In these close quarters, private moments are treasures snatched from a world of constraint. Perhaps you find yourselves briefly alone in a hallway, the flicker of candlelight making shadows leap and your pulse quicken. Your conversation, necessarily restrained, carries the weight of everything left unsaid. Every word, every silence exists in a heightened register. Do you find the garden pleasing this time of year? Becomes, in this secret language, an invitation to a world beyond rules. But the world presses in. The moment is inevitably interrupted. A cough. The rustle of approaching footsteps. The courtship reverts to its coded choreography. Yet, though propriety must be preserved, there is power in this ritual. Everyone sees only what you permit them to see. In the performance of social grace, the cleverest manage to carve out real connection and meaning. You guide the scene, deciding when to glance away, when to allow your laughter to ring out, and when to veil your feelings beneath carefully steered conversation. The gifts exchanged are subtle, sometimes less material than emotional. A pressed flower, a poem nestled in a coat pocket, a song softly hummed as you pass by. The art of courtship is as much about leaving traces of yourself as it is about revealing your intentions outright. You become adept at reading the smallest cues, noticing an uncharacteristic stillness, the precise shade of a blush, or the hesitance in a reply. Meanwhile, the space itself becomes both barrier and accomplice. Furniture is arranged to encourage gatherings, yet always with an eye for separation. A faint will sit between you and the object of your interest. But it is the very act of finding connection, despite separation, that defines the era's romance. At the end of the evening, lingering by a carriage or staircase, your goodbye is layered with as much meaning as any conversation that came before. This is a world in which closeness rarely means privacy. There is always an audience, even if it's only the portrait of a distant ancestor glowering down from the wall. And so, the most thrilling moments are often the smallest. A shared joke, a threaded look, a companionable silence in a crowded parlour. In these, you find the real beating heart of courtship. A heart that thrives precisely because of the confines it must beat against. So, you flirt with distance, wielding jasmine and fans, half hidden in a maze of customs. Yet in every carefully measured encounter, you claim a fragment of freedom, forging intimacy by inch, never mile. In close quarters, true connection is not just possible, it becomes inevitable. Attempts at underarm freshness involve lemon juice, crushed herbs, or, if you're scandalously avant-garde, dabbling in vinegar. The result? You smell like salad dressing, but at least it's artisanal. The history of deodorant is a parade of good intentions gone awry and creative solutions that sound suspiciously like recipes for vinaigrette. If you lived in, say, 17th century England and found yourself ripe after a summer's stroll, your first instinct might be to rub some mint onto your armpits, or perhaps a bit of sage. The logic was simple. If it worked for lamb, surely it could work for you. Parsley wasn't just for garnishing meat pies. If there was a green thing in the garden, eager hands tried it under the arms. Maybe there was a glimmer of hope. After all, anything was better than nothing. But the truth, nothing quite tamed the pong. There's a reason that musty lavender sachets remained permanently stitched into doublets and gowns. Let's spare a thought for those who chased the elixir of armpit invisibility by dousing themselves with rosewater, an export as valuable as gold. Imagine saving up your florins or farthings and triumphantly sloshing rosewater all over yourself, all to find that after an hour at the chessboard or the town square, everything reverts spectacularly to eau de humain. And if you ran out of rosewater, there was always the fallback, sponging yourself with diluted wine, though the risk of being mistaken for a walking tavern was significant. Of course, vinegar enjoyed celebrity status. Apothecaries swore by it. Learned women would whisper about vinegar washes between themselves, though the secrecy probably stemmed from the fact that only the bravest could survive the sting. You'd line up lemon juice for the ambitious, vinegar for the intrepid, and for those desperate souls, a heady tincture involving both, perhaps even with a hint of alum, which was believed to close the pores. Did it actually work? Only if by work you meant rendering your armpits bright pink and giving them the faint aroma of a lightly dressed salad. Let's pause for a moment to consider the oddballs and visionaries who tried other means, like dusting flour, rubbing ashes, or even, wait for it, essential oils harvested from plants no one could identify. You might turn a few heads at first, wafting clouds of lavender, lily, and basil. But time does what it does best, undermines every clever plan. The delicate herbal haze quickly gives way to the steamy aroma of personhood. The result is a collision of scents where neither wins, and by mid-afternoon, your best hope is a strong gust of wind. What's truly remarkable is the communal silence that enveloped these deodorant disasters. Diaries and letters from the era managed eloquence on countless topics: trade, politics, the weather, but are suspiciously quiet about the specifics of hygiene. Perhaps there was a gentleman's agreement. Don't ask, don't smell, don't tell. If everyone equally stank of lemon, parsley, and nervous expectation, was there even anything to discuss? Still, amid these blunders, there's a plucky optimism, a kind of medieval fake-it-till-you-make-it spirit. People believed the next concoction, be it the juice of a rare Turkish melon or a blend of camphor and orris root, would at last conquer the armpit apocalypse. They never stopped innovating, even when the results were dubious at best. So, next time you reach for your aluminum-free, pH-balanced, dermatologist-approved stick, remember our ancestors and their culinary approach to personal hygiene. They suffered so you could breeze through summer without smelling like a compostable salad. Would they have envied our clever lotions and sprays? No doubt. But maybe, just maybe, they'd have missed the simple, scandalous thrill of a well-placed lemon wedge. During Mass, priests waft incense with all the fervour of someone desperate to hide the sense of both sin and the congregation's feet. The church is the only place that smells like church, and possibly burnt cake. Incense is unique in its power to transport the mind, evoking ancient rituals and holy mystique while simultaneously making the sanctuary smell vaguely of Aunt Maud's kitchen mishaps. One whiff, and you know you're somewhere set apart, where sacred mysteries unfold, and where any evidence of last night's fish supper is resolutely denied. The ritual begins with choreography that blurs solemnity with spectacle. With a swift, practiced dip, the priest packs the thurible, that heavy, swinging censer, full of fragrant resin. He then approaches the altar, face grave, with a seriousness usually reserved for reading tax documents, and swings the thurible back and forth. The gesture is equal parts blessing and banishment, as though shooing away invisible demons, or, perhaps, the odd, errant fly. If you've ever sat in the front pew, you know the dual hazards of holy smoke. The eyes that water, the lungs that are put through their paces, and the irrepressible urge to sneeze. Congregants exchange glances, half devotion, half desperate telepathy. If I cough, will you? But even as eyes sting, there's a comfort in this ritual. The swirling clouds seem to gather prayers, draw them heavenward, and wrap the community in a fragrant embrace, a sensory shield against the world's distractions. There's an unspoken hierarchy to who gets incensed and how. The altar receives the first smoky blessing, followed by the sacred offerings, clergy, and finally, the assembled faithful, each given their due, as though holy smoke were a Eucharistic amuse-bouche, a hint of the divine. Each pass with a thurible punctuates the liturgy, a wordless language older than sermon or hymn. Incense itself demands reverence. The blend, often a churchy cocktail of frankincense and myrrh, is no mere potpourri. Its recipe, whispered through generations, traces back to the incense offerings in the Temple of Jerusalem. Every priest's stealthy top-up, from a battered tin, signals tradition's endurance and the quiet hope that more is, indeed, more. Sometimes, the resulting haze is so dense, you half expect the choir to emerge wearing miner's lamps. Children and first-time visitors tend to treat incense like an alien presence, wrinkling noses or fixating on the thurible as it swings perilously close to the altar cloth. There's every likelihood that at some point the dramatic waft will set off alarms, actual or imagined, about fabric safety. And yet, the moment passes, and the ritual continues, undisturbed and unhurried. Behind the drama lies deep symbolism. The drifting smoke rising to the rafters is a wordless prayer, a visible, tangible plea for mercy and grace. For centuries, wafting incense has signified purification, sanctification, and the hope that what is offered below might be pleasing above. That the mingled odours of human frailty are somehow transformed in the process. By the time the thurible is retired for the afternoon, the air is thick with a scent that lingers long after the last hymn. Congregants shuffle out, their coats carrying the telltale aroma of faith, a paradoxical blend of smoke and reassurance. If the purpose of incense is to signal that something holy has happened, then mission accomplished. Each whiff, days later, is a reminder that, for a moment, the everyday was touched by the sacred, with just a whiff of burnt cake. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments or the addition of any particular anecdotes or sources. Linen shifts get washed roughly once a month, sometimes in lye, sometimes just in a prayer. You choose your undergarments based on smell, stiffness, and the likelihood they will stand up on their own. The phrase, freshly laundered, in this era, is best understood as less universally repulsive than the alternative. There is a ranking system to your available wardrobe, and it has nothing to do with fashion. Most days, you reach for the item that induces the least emotional discomfort. Some shifts are prickly. Others are just heavy, still crusted with ancient grime, their true colour a matter of feverish speculation. Occasionally, you find a shirt so outstandingly sour that superstitious relatives claim it can ward off illness, unwanted suitors, and sometimes rats. Such is the laundry lottery of royal life. It's not the embroidery or the cut that marks a true favourite, but the indefinable quality of least offensive. There are whispered tales of the king's laundress, more powerful than any minister, provided she keeps the smalls from blooming into sentient beings. Some believe she possesses magic, or failing that, at least a strong stomach and no sense of smell. Laundry, then, is not a domestic task, but a cycle of anxious hope and mild despair. If you belong to the nobility, some distant servant is responsible for collecting, sorting, and, ostensibly, washing your linens. This seems ideal in theory. In practice, it means every item sent to the laundry embarks on a journey with no guaranteed return, like a woolen odyssey. You learn not to grow attached. Royal handkerchiefs and undershirts have a way of vanishing, reappearing months later in ghostly shades, frayed or altered by mysterious means. If you find your initials clumsily corrected to someone else's, you say nothing and quietly accept your demotion in the garment pecking order. During the periodic laundry day, the palace is transformed. Buckets and barrels crowd the corridors. The air is scented faintly with lye, more strongly with failed attempts to mask it. Bundles of dried lavender, posies tied to window frames, pungent herbs scattered underfoot. The bravest among the staff hall boiling water, sometimes risking burns, sometimes content to let the stains soak in cold regret. Good as new here means recognizably cloth. The process is, of course, a spectacle. What begins as communal effort quickly devolves into a competitive sport. Servants jostle to retrieve their assigned master's linens first, knowing the incoming complaints are directly proportional to the rank of the shirt's owner. Somewhere, a clerk attempts to maintain an impossible ledger of each item's progress, crossing their ink-stained fingers that nothing terribly important has disappeared this cycle. But consider for a moment the great social equalizer hidden in these humble piles of washing. For all their finery and feasts, even princes must occasionally wear the standby shift, ill-fitting, faintly suspicious in origin. And pray the court's current fashion leans toward layers. Behind every jeweled courtesan and silk-robed lord is an endless anxiety. Will the next step, curtsy, or draught of wind unleash a whiff strong enough to undo diplomacy itself? In this world, shifts are more than fabric. They are humble shields against humiliation, and every freshly or freshly adjacent laundered item brings a fleeting sense of fortune. There is a quiet camaraderie among those who nod across the hall, both relieved by their temporary reprieve from the terrors of the laundry basket. In the end, the real lottery in royal laundry was never about whose shift was washed, but rather about whose pride survived the cycle. For tomorrow, as ever, would bring a new drawing, and perhaps, if fortune smiled, a shift that was merely soft, smelling only vaguely of soap and adventure. Actual baths are rare and somewhat terrifying, reserved for the wildly ill or the exceptionally optimistic. When it does happen, the water's shared by the whole household, resulting in a scent profile best described as hot compost with notes of old sock. In reality, most days aren't marked by steamy soaks, but by a more pragmatic relationship with cleanliness. When your family is juggling chores, farm animals, and a never-ending parade of unwashed laundry, opportunities for personal hygiene rank somewhere between fixing the leaky roof and, maybe, finally reading that Bible passage without falling asleep. The average child quickly learns that a hasty splash of cold water to the face and a half-hearted scrub at visible dirt is more than enough to appease parental standards. After all, as long as you don't actively smell like you've been rolling in pig slop, you're essentially spotless. It's not for lack of effort on someone's part. There's always one anxious parent or older sibling hoping to uphold civilization by enforcing a bath schedule. Their ambitions, though, are almost always dashed by the logistics of an era without indoor plumbing. Fetching water from the well becomes an epic quest, like chasing a golden fleece, except the prize is a heavy, sloshing bucket and the certainty of another trip in 5 minutes. Lighting the fire under the copper tub takes just as long, made worse by the fact that the wood is usually damp, and only half a chimney sweep's knowledge keeps the kitchen from filling with smoke. By the time the tub is deemed ready, you're faint from anticipation. And by you, we mean the entire household, required to strip and queue in order of most to least respectable grime levels. The first bather wins the lottery of cleanliness for about 5 glorious minutes. After that, each subsequent soul must wade into a broth that's gradually taken on the appearance and consistency of weak stew. The water never seems to cool as quickly as you hope, steaming in the corner and broadcasting the day's collective sweat, mud, and secrets to anyone within sniffing distance. It's no wonder younger siblings adopt evasive tactics, sometimes willing to barter chores, sweets, or even future inheritance in exchange for being excused. Bathing on such rare and public occasions is equal parts ritual and humiliation. Privacy is a luxury reserved for the very young or terminally ill. Everyone else learns to disassociate, focusing intently on the peeling wallpaper or reciting the Lord's Prayer in reverse order, while an aunt scrubs behind your ears with the determination of a woman possessed. In the grand tradition of family suffering, siblings take great delight in making faces at each other or inventing competitions. Who can hold their breath the longest? Who survives the bracing pour of rinsing water without squealing? Of course, the conclusion of bath time is itself a spectacle. Everyone slicked and slightly pink, emerging in a cloud of humid air, hair hastily patted down with the same towel that's been in play since Michaelmas. Clothes go on over still damp skin, and you're promptly dispatched to the fireside, both to dry off and to be on display for the adults, who will then remark for the rest of the evening on how clean you look. The faint scent of hot compost with notes of old sock lingers in the room, a silent reminder that nothing in this life comes without its sacrifices. And so, the cycle resumes. Next week, or perhaps next fortnight, depending on how daring you're feeling, the conversation will circle back. Is it time for another bath? The answer, more often than not, is a sigh, a shared look of horror, and a firm resolve to make do with a stained facecloth and the sweet absolution of denial. The evening meal resounds with aromas of overcooked meats, questionable fish, and the ever-present tang of garlic. You grimace, sip your highly alcoholic wine, and pray the strongest smell of the night isn't you. The dining room, if you could call it that, is a cacophony of clinking forks, forced laughter, and the scraping of mismatched chairs across the tile floor. Somewhere, in the room, someone barks a joke with their mouth half full, sending a flurry of breadcrumbs to decorate the already stained tablecloth. You exchange a look with your neighbour, equal parts commiseration and apology. Everyone seems to be here for the food, and yet paradoxically, no one seems pleased by it. At the centre of every table sits a bowl of something, maybe stew, maybe a collective dare. The meat, marinated within an inch of its life, surrenders under your fork, but only just. Each bite is a challenge, how to navigate the gristle, the chew, the sodium assault, and the omnipresent garlic that stings the back of your nose. You try to identify the protein, beef, lamb, a particularly muscular chicken, but abandon the endeavour when your palate is overrun by an avalanche of herbs and, of course, another note of garlic. Conversation meanders from polite inquiries to circumspect silence as friends and strangers alike wrestle with their plates. Someone comments on the robust flavours, a gentle euphemism for aggressive, the culinary equivalent of being hit over the head with a sack of onions. Another guest, emboldened by a second glass of the nose-tingling wine, declares their love of garlic, provoking a round of nervous laughter. Garlic, here, isn't a garnish. It's a lifestyle. As the meal progresses, stories begin to flow as freely as the wine. Embarrassing anecdotes of previous dinners are aired, tales of undercooked birds, desserts that never set, and sauces with the consistency of cement. These stories, told with self-deprecating charm and a wink, weave guests together in their shared misfortune, inviting camaraderie and an unspoken bond of perseverance. Still, you can't help but notice the subtle ways people try to disguise their uneaten bites. Slipping meat into napkins, shuffling potatoes under lettuce, leaves. You catch yourself scanning the room for an exit strategy. Yet, amid the sensory assault, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice fleeting joys. The utterly sincere compliment a guest gives about the wine's personality. The soft flicker of candlelight across faces animated by stories and laughter. The music, a delightful melange of local string instruments and raucous singing, drifting in from the courtyard. The savoury kiss of garlic, once so overwhelming, evolves into a kind of comfort, heralding the shared experience of breaking bread, however misshapen or pungent, across borders and backgrounds. Dessert, when it finally arrives, is both a relief and a fresh ordeal. The cake is dry, admittedly, but it provides a neutral ground at last, a punctuation mark to a sentence written in garlic and regret. The evening meal concludes with a final, heartfelt toast. To new friends, old recipes, and indelible memories. Glasses clink with the melodrama of the moment. As you sip, you realise that tonight, the meal wasn't about food. It was about endurance, adaptation, and the kind of laughter that only comes when you're trapped together with nothing else to do but survive and enjoy. When you finally step outside, cool night air washes over you, carrying off the heavy, spicy fog. You're certain you'll never eat garlic again, until, inevitably, the next time. For now, though, you're simply grateful to be part of a story that will grow funnier and more exaggerated every time it's told. The lingering taste of camaraderie, as it turns out, is the one thing stronger than garlic. As the night deepens, you reapply your signature musk, a fragrance so intense it's been banned from some monasteries and at least one fox hunt. The party continues, noses numbed by excess, ears ringing from lyre music and strategic laughter. This isn't just any musk, and it isn't just any night. The musk you wield operates on several planes: olfactory, psychological, diplomatic. Some speak in whispers of its provenance, a tincture rumoured distilled from rare resins, outlawed wildflowers, and at least a suspicion of civet. But specifics never matter. What matters is effect. Guests swirl around you like slightly inebriated moths divided between awe and borderline asphyxiation. You prowl the periphery, wafting intimidation and intrigue in equal measure, uncertain who will yield first, their composure or their sinuses. The dignitary from Thessaly regards you warily, his silver goblet tremors not entirely wine-induced. He's recovered from your earlier discussion, allegedly about trade routes, though it mostly consisted of you spouting bold claims while he coughed discreetly. You sense he's close to surrender. But this is not the time for mercy. The musicians pause, half in anticipation, half in silent rebellion against the rich animal tang hanging in the air. You seize the moment, dabbing a touch of musk strategically behind your ears, a gesture nested somewhere between sacrament and challenge. The effect is immediate. Laughter turns brittle, some eyes water, heads subtly incline in your direction, as if reconfiguring their airways. At these gatherings, power is not asserted by loud arguments or overt opulence, but by subtler signals consumed and understood only by true initiates. Your musk, potent and polarizing, makes you unforgettable, even immortal in party lore. One hostess makes a show of fanning herself, claiming it's the heat, but everyone knows it's you. Stories will be told tomorrow, each guest remembering the night through the haze of mingled aromas, none quite recalling the sequence of events, but all recalling your presence. And so you adapt, tuning your behaviour as your scent drifts, laughing a touch louder, eyebrow arched at just the right angle, conspiratorial in the corners, and bombastic at the buffet. Your musk is camouflage and announcement, armour and invocation, marking you both instigator of festivities and their secret sovereign. No one can say when the night truly peaked, but all will agree it coincided with your reapplication. You take a moment for introspection, catching your reflection in a polished goblet. The smoky torchlight softens your features, but there is no masking the confidence that transformative scent instills. This isn't concealment, it's emergence. The musk says what words could not, that you, tonight, set the terms. As the evening ripens, you drift toward the garden, companions and admirers trailing like perfume at your wake. Here, in the cool night air, the fragrance appears almost delicate by comparison, subtle as the memory of earlier mischiefs. Someone follows, curiosity overpowering caution, eager to ask the secret. You only smile, offering nothing but enigma and the lingering curl of scent in your passage. By dawn, only a few partygoers remain true to consciousness. Furniture is askew, platters ravaged, scandalous rumours already germinating. You slip out quietly, having left traces of your musk on pillows, draperies, the collective consciousness. The party, for all its excess and incident, will fade, yet you will linger, remembered as the night's intoxicating riddle, masked and unmasked by the power of your chosen aroma. Let me know if you'd like further revisions based on a specific transcript section, or if you need additional dialogue or references to historical atmosphere. You pen notes to your beloved, dabbing them with scents, both sweet and dubious. Nothing says eternal love like saffron, rosewater, and a hint of old envelope. The ritual is 1 part devotion, 2 parts theatrical flair. You select your finest stationery, creamy vellum perhaps, or paper marbled with faint blues and golds. Knowing every fibre will carry the ghost of your scent, you sit by the candlelight, quill in hand, and pause to consider your words. This is no mere grocery list. This, you declare to the moon outside, is alchemy. What starts as ink and paper will soon carry the weight of longing, and possibly cinnamon oil, to its destination. You write, of course, in languid prose. No matter your age, you always imagine yourself as a bard, a figure worthy of grand declarations. My dearest Violet, whose eyes mirror the evening sky, whose laughter turns the cruel world gentle. You let emotions spill over, slightly excessive. But isn't excess the very currency of romance? Yet behind all the flourish, there is always that shy secret hope that your words enact a transformation, that a simple letter might unlock something like magic. Then comes the matter of fragrance. In a practical sense, it's a code, a whisper, a memory, a signal. The careful application of attars and oils is a message in itself, redolent with meaning. Saffron, rare and golden, is for devotion. Rosewater for grace and tenderness. A streak of musk hints, perhaps, at something bolder. You dab a handkerchief, test the scent twice, and hope you haven't overdone it. Too much, and your letter arrives like a perfumer's accident. Too little, and the risk is anonymity. There is artistry in the choice of seal too. A crimson wax stamp pressed with a family crest, or maybe a lopsided heart, if you're feeling braver than usual. From the outside, the letter must project intent and care. Its recipient knows, not just that you wrote, but that you obsessed. Over the words, the scents, the flourish at the envelope's edge. For some, the seal is more than mere closure. It's a promise. Others will break it gently, as if unwrapping a treasure. Even before the letter is opened, anticipation blooms. The envelope rests in your beloved's hands, heavy with innuendo. There is a moment of hesitation. What secrets lie within? Will the words burn, or soothe, or both? Will the sender's intent, hidden beneath the surface, swirling in saffron and rose, be truly understood? So much is left unsaid, after all, concealed by perfumed ink and poet's license. You know, as all lovers do, that a letter can be both promise and gamble. There is risk in every phrase, every lingering scent. Perhaps your perfume will remind her of a rival. Perhaps your words will fall flat, too earnest, too desperate. But you send the letter anyway, because not sending it would be worse. The ache of silence far outstrips the embarrassment of a love note gone awry. So much of romance, in the end, is about uncertainty, the frisson of hope against all reason. You fold your letter, seal it, and send it tumbling through uncertain channels. Post, servant, fortune, fate. Maybe it lands in the right hands. Maybe the scent lingers just long enough. Maybe it joins a growing collection, tucked beneath a pillow, faded but not forgotten. And when, days or weeks later, the reply comes, a hand familiar, a scent recognizable through everything else, it is worth every trembling line and scented risk. For in a world where so much fades, a love letter endures, its words hovering in perfumed air, long after paper has turned to memory. You light extravagant candles made with everything from tallow to beeswax, hoping the smoky haze will conquer the worst offenders. At best, it's a draw. At worst, you now also smell like barbecue. What's intriguing is how universal the impulse is. Strike a match, fight back. Since the earliest days of civilization, people have held fast to the faith that fire can cleanse as well as warm. Ancient Romans burned bay leaves and myrrh after raucous banquets. Vikings favoured pine and juniper to disguise the tang of sweat, fish, and centuries-old furs. Throughout history, the ritual remains the same. Something in the room reeks, and the solution is to burn something else. Your candles, though, aren't the simple tapers of the past, but miniature sculptures, promising lavender daydreams or the illusion of a Mediterranean garden in spring. The names are poetry: jasmine and sea salt, tobacco and amber, patchouli rainstorm. Their effects, less so. A lavish votive in a gilded glass might deliver an hour of hopeful fragrance, but as the smoke thickens, it rarely does more than shuffle the odours around, like a dejected mall cop pushed to the far end of the food court. The science, as usual, is less romantic. Candles, even the best, add particulates to the air while theoretically absorbing others. Many luxury candles are paraffin-based, releasing not just scents, but microscopic debris and, occasionally, a chemical cocktail worthy of a high school lab practical. The odour you're masking may fade for a moment, but you're also layering in compounds with names you'll never want to Google. Oddly enough, some studies suggest the thick beeswax pillars favoured by the Victorians do the best job of snaring unpleasant smells by ionising the air. But unless your problem is Sherlock Holmes's den post-mystery, you're mostly just exchanging one mysterious haze for another. Candle evangelists will swear by smudge sticks, amber, incense cones, an arsenal of aromatic distractions. Of course, every generation believes its tricks are brand new. Medieval households clung to pomanders, literally balls of spices and resin sealed in ornate cases, swung through the air like perfumed flails to ward off miasmas. In the 19th century, desperate to banish the stench of London's sewers, the rich set ablaze sticks of camphor and cinnamon on every mantelpiece, turning parlours into a cross between an apothecary and a fire hazard. You too join this tradition, but with an added burden: fear of the lingering smell of the cover-up itself. Was it better to tolerate that sulphurous whiff? Or has your well-intentioned candle left the place smelling like a burned gift shop? There's a reason the phrase smoke and mirrors suggests deception. With candles, it's rarely about elimination, just misdirection, an olfactory sleight of hand. The worst-case scenario is as old as time: a burned wick, blackened ceiling, a scent that lingers like heartbreak, or barbecue sauce lingering well after the guests have gone. And so we cycle through phases. One day, you're a purist, cracking a window, or waving your arms in a comical ballet of desperation. The next, you surrender to the allure of a hand-poured candle, convinced sea breeze and eucalyptus will succeed where centuries of desperate souls have failed. The world's oldest struggle, distilled down to a flicker in the dark and hope in a scent. In this, at least, you're never alone. Just one more candle holder in a very smoky line. Would you like this segment edited for a different emphasis, or expanded further? If you wish for a sample dialogue or specific historical anecdotes woven in, let me know. You finish the day in a nightshirt that's heavier on perfume than laundering. The air is thick, the lice are unbothered, and you're lulled to sleep by tomorrow's promise that, olfactorily speaking, it could always get worse. Nighttime in the pre-modern age is not the gentle, soft-lit sanctuary of cotton sheets and lavender pillow mists we might know today. Instead, as darkness swallows the last dregs of daylight, you fumble to undress in the flickering amber of a candle stub, trying not to brush too closely against the neighbour's laundry, hung, of course, in your shared sleeping quarters for lack of space, privacy, or hope. The nightshirt you pull over your head is more ritual than comfort. It's a garment as much out of habit as necessity, its scratchy wool a relic of its own, having soaked up so many accumulated scents and memories that it could clear a crowded tavern if wrung out with vigour. Once encased in this fabric armour, you reach for your nightcap. Not the sort dotted with nutmeg and liquor, but the actual floppy cap. Its main purpose to keep the night chill from crawling straight through your scalp. Scientists of the age may have been divided on how bad air causes sickness. But on the subject of drafts, there's consensus. Exposure is dangerous. The nightcap's saggy silhouette, comical to the modern eye, is a symbol of survival. Its threadbare edge, cradling not just your hair, but your hopes of warding off the midnight shivers. Your nose prickles. Cloying perfumes try valiantly and fail spectacularly to mask the riotous funk of the day. An entire ecosystem is alive and well on your skin. Lice and fleas, those tireless companions of the pre-modern sleeper, take advantage of immobility, working their way into cuffs and collars with the industry of tiny foremen. You wish for a fresh laundering, or even the mere existence of such things as fresh. But water is scarce, and soap is scarcer. In any case, both are considered more dangerous than dirt, at least by those authorities who seem always to be exempt from following their own advice. Those sharing your room, and perhaps your narrow straw-stuffed pallet, perform their own awkward ballet, settling in for the night while emitting a symphony of murmurs, coughs, the creak of bed timbers, and the occasional earnest prayer for unbroken sleep. Privacy is a phantom. There are no locked doors, no solitary retreats. Instead, dreams must be snatched amongst the collective mumbling, the passing of wind, the gentle scratching of vermin unseen but keenly felt. You may momentarily envy the family dog who sleeps without nightshirt or cap, blissful in ignorance and fur. Still, there are small comforts to be found. Fingers trace familiar tears in the nightshirt's hem, reminders of years past, scraps of linen mended with coarse thread in patterns more accidental than artistic. The heavy, musty cloth feels, despite everything, almost like a second skin, protective and oddly reassuring. On lucky evenings, perhaps there's a story told, a low communal laugh, the solace of routine. A mug of warm beer or milk sits nearby, a last feeble bulwark against the coming cold and the certainty that whatever tomorrow brings, it will do so with little regard for your olfactory happiness. And so you surrender to the night, the mingled scents of people and pests, the muffled sounds of a household at uneasy rest. The darkness thickens, dreams tug at your edge of consciousness, and you drift off, hoping at least that the lice will have the courtesy to stay above your nightshirt's neckline tonight. Scratching, sighing, you sleep. And so does the world around you, rumbling, dreaming, enduring, wrapped in its own nightcaps and nightshirts, waiting for day's worsening promise. If you'd like further adjustments, or want additional period-specific detail or dialogue, just let me know. As the palace quiets, you dream vividly of clear running water and a bar of unperfumed, unscented, honest-to-goodness soap. Tomorrow, you'll settle for another spritz of civet and a new sachet in your trousers, with the feeble candlelight flickering away. Shadows stretch long across the ancient stone walls, and your mind floats somewhere between sleep and memories of freshness. It's almost laughable, really, that what you crave, in all the opulence of Versailles, is not another gem-studded doublet or a more gilded spoon, but the simple, honest purity of warm water sluicing over your skin, carrying away the grime of another ceremonial day. You picture your childhood, before titles, before etiquette lessons, when bathing was a weekly ritual that felt like a festival. The scrub of a bristly brush, the lather of true soap, the sensation of coming clean. How distant that feels now, nestled in sheets that smell of old lavender and ambition, under ceilings painted with cherubs who will never know sweat or dust. Sleep tugs insistently at your eyes, but your mind wanders through the halls of your senses. The daily symphony of perfume is almost dizzying. Orange flower water at breakfast, stroking over wrists and neck. Rosewater smuggled in handkerchiefs. Sachets of vetiver and bergamot impossibly stuffed into every pocket, collar and sleeve. And always the underlying note, something darker, animalic, and entirely unignorable. Civet, musk, ambergris. Each nobleman, each courtier, wears their own cloud as a mask and armour, hoping to mask the fact that none of you are truly clean. Earlier tonight at supper, the Queen's newest favourite had fanned herself and whispered, with a glance toward you, "He always smells so refined." You managed a practiced chuckle. You know the truth. It is equal parts courtly artifice and desperate hope, the endless quest to disguise yesterday's perspiration beneath layers of imported fragrance. Tomorrow morning, when you accept a new sash or an embroidered waistcoat, you'll discreetly slide a sachet under the waistband, and the attendant will mist your linen with the sharp, almost stinging scent of lemon verbena. It will buy just a few more hours before the palace's perpetual funk wins again. By moonlight, you remember stories told in the kitchens. Old Baptiste, the chief scullion, claims that somewhere far to the south, in Marseille, the soap makers still press pure olive oil and ash into cakes so fine you could mistake them for pastry. Once, a travelling merchant pressed a sliver into your palm, soft as wax, and scented only faintly of laurel. A brief, dazzling token of what life could be like if cleanliness was something you could actually purchase, rather than just aspire to with perfume and powder. You wonder if any of your ancestors, those stern-faced men in portraits glowering over the grand staircase, ever imagined that their descendants would spend so much effort scenting themselves, so little on actual cleaning. Did they even care? Your generation inherited the perfumed gauntlet of an entire court that, despite its silks and splendour, clings to the shadows of sweat and stale hearts. In a final half-waking moment, the scent of soap becomes hauntingly real, as if someone, somewhere, has cracked a window to a world of lather and light. For a heartbeat, you are porous, all lingering bitterness and longing. Then the vision fades. The hush of the palace reminds you that in Versailles, dreams smell sweet. But mornings always come with a fresh sachet, never with a bar of soap. And as you slip across the threshold into sleep, you vow that if ever fortune allows, you will find a way back to that fresh, forgotten ritual. But for now, you'll settle for the dream. Some whisper of lands where bathing is a daily privilege, soap exists, and fresh air is more than a rumour. You drift off, hopeful that one day the world might be scrubbed just a little bit brighter. Most of history, after all, wasn't quite so fragrant. The clean few occupied almost mythical status. Tales of individuals who doused themselves in more than mere perfume or bravely embraced a cold river swim were told with the same awe usually reserved for knights slaying dragons. In royal courts, a single aristocrat spotted with a fresh face and unmatted hair could spark rumours of secret elixirs or magical routines imported from the distant, suspiciously hygienic East. Imagine the courtier who dared wash more than twice a month in Louis XIV's Versailles. Was he a revolutionary, a scientific anomaly, or simply the proud owner of 2 buckets and a rebellious spirit? Perhaps all three. Legends spread quickly. Catherine de' Medici allegedly imported her own perfumers, while Queen Elizabeth reputedly took a bath once a month, whether she needed it or not. These stories rolled down the centuries, whispered between launderers and bathhouse attendants, as rare, almost scandalous accounts of what was possible when water met skin, more often than the calendar recommended. But even the clean few weren't entirely immune to the hazards of hygiene. With soap at a premium and indoor plumbing, the stuff of fevered fantasy, improvised rituals emerged. Scented handkerchiefs pressed to noses, pockets of dried herbs sewn into collars, and endless layers of clothing were all valiant, if futile, attempts to stave off the inevitable assault of human reality. For every noblewoman draping herself in lavender sachets, there was a laundress scrubbing bed linens with lye until her hands cracked, or simply hoping the next owner wouldn't notice the stains. So, the stories grew ever more creative. There's even the persistent legend of the soap magnate of Vienna, a baroness who was said to have guarded the only reliable soap recipe in Europe, trading slivers of it for jewels and secrets. Whether or not she existed is beside the point. She became a symbol, proof that cleanliness could be as exclusive and as longed for as status and silk. The rumour was enough to inspire desperate nobles to commission fountains and bathhouses, rarely finished, and armies of perfumers to mask reality with ever richer fragrances. Of course, the everyday reality, for most, was less enchanting. When the rare stories of the clean elite slipped into the common sphere, they fueled both admiration and quiet resentment. For peasants and city dwellers alike, a festival day might be the sole chance to wash, making even the faintest whiff of lemon or rosemary on a passing noble seem otherworldly. These were the unsung heroes of survival by adaptation, the ones stuffing shoes with thyme, dousing themselves in vinegar and rose water, and hoping for a strong breeze. Yet, as the centuries slipped by, science and sanitation began their slow march. The legends of the clean few laid the groundwork, mythical proof that it was at least possible, even if rare and inexplicably glamorous. Soon, soap ceased to be a commodity worth its weight in silver, and daily bathing became less an act of rebellion and more a mundane birthright. But perhaps, in every modern bathroom stocked with body wash and triple milled soap, a faint echo of these old legends persists. And so tonight, as you drift off in your clean cotton sheets, with the gentle hum of your air purifier and the promise of tomorrow's hot shower, spare a thought for the high-born noses of ages past. Reek was the cologne of royalty, musk the currency of kings, and every whiff was a gamble between romance and warfare. History, it turns out, wasn't just about power and wealth. It was about creative survival, even when that meant stuffing your shoes with thyme and your wig with half a garden. So be grateful as you snuggle deeper into your unscented pillow for the humble modern luxury of soap, deodorant and laundry that doesn't cause mass extinctions of insects. Because history may be absurd, pungent, and just a little bit terrifying, but it's proof that people have always done whatever it takes to smell just good enough to get by. Sleep well, nose unscathed. And so tonight, as you drift off in your clean cotton sheets with the gentle hum of your air purifier and the promise of tomorrow's hot shower, spare a thought for the high-born noses of ages past. Reek was the cologne of royalty, musk the currency of kings, and every whiff was a gamble between romance and warfare. History, it turns out, wasn't just about power and wealth. It was about creative survival, even when that meant stuffing your shoes with thyme and your wig with half a garden. So be grateful as you snuggle deeper into your unscented pillow for the humble modern luxury of soap, deodorant and laundry that doesn't cause mass extinctions of insects. Because history may be absurd, pungent and just a little bit terrifying, but it's proof that people have always done whatever it takes to smell just good enough to get by. Sleep well, nose unscathed.